Force One. Imagine that. And so he turned around, came back, landed it, and got on another jet. And was like, they're not going to keep me out of this. So he flew over to Davos, and he excoriated a lot of people at Davos. One of those being the Canadian Prime Minister that was on before him, probably thinking that he wouldn't make it because his plane had problems. Maybe they're all, they all knew. And when he showed up, that must have been quite a surprise for them. So, they're going to continually try to take out President Trump. We already know that. I think the Trump team is pretty much very, very knowledgeable. They're doing what they can to prevent that every chance they get. Of course, there's probably been a lot of attempts on his life that we will never know about. And that was probably one of them. And so they prevented that, and that's a good thing. Now, Scott Bessent brutally tears into Gavin Patrick Bateman, as he calls him, Newsom. Now, Patrick Bateman was a serial killer in a show. He hit him pretty hard there. So I'm gonna share that real quick, and then we're gonna have Larry Ballard come on and share some really insightful stuff. Well, let's see, how this Davos event went for these globalists.
Very ironic that Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken, may be the only Californian who knows less about economics than Kamala Harris. He's here this week with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros, and the Davos is a perfect place for a man who, when everyone else was on lockdown, when he was having people arrested for going to church, he was having $1,000 a night meals at the French Laundry, and I'm sure the California people won't forget that. And I can tell my message to Governor Newsom is the Trump administration is coming to California. We are going to crack down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And I was told he was asked to give a speech on his signature policies, but he's not speaking because what have his economic policies brought? Outward migration from California, a gigantic budget deficit, the largest homeless population in America, and the poor folks in the Palisades who had their homes burned down. He is here hobnobbing with the global elite while his California citizens are still homeless. Shame on him. He is too smug, too self-absorbed, and too economically illiterate to know anything.
Thank you very much.
Let me know.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So that's the kind of way it went. So Trump came on and he was speaking and he said, and it's interesting because he comes on and says, I get along with Gavin Newsom. So gives them a sock and they're like, oh, can I help you up? Or are you bleeding? Here's a handkerchief. And yeah, you're nice. You're okay. So that's kind of the way the Trump has been handling these people for quite some time. He's been, knocking hell out of them like he talks about. He says, we're going to knock the hell out of them. That's what he said about a lot of things. Of course, ISIS, and he came in. I was there for many, many years when ISIS was overseas. I was in Iraq. I was in, other areas. And I was telling the CIA, who I worked for at the time, I was like, why don't we, go after these guys? Al-Baghdadi is obviously, somebody that needs to be taken out. And of course, when Trump comes in, he takes down al-Baghdadi, and who was the head of Al-Qaeda, not Al-Qaeda, but ISIS. And, they just disintegrated very rapidly under Trump. So I think President Trump is going to knock hell out of a lot of things. And we're going to have Larry Ballard come in and talk about some of that. Larry, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Michael. A crazy day. By the way, I almost missed you here because I thought Tahoe was in Mountain Time in specific. So that's why you saw me sitting on the couch. I had you queued up and I thought I had a few minutes yet. So anyway, let you take me wherever you want to go. I'm just along for the ride, but I can answer anything pretty much on the cuff.
Yeah, you have that calm in the storm slide presentation Do you want me to bring that
Okay.
up, or do you have that? You want to bring it up, or how do you?
No, you can bring it up. I'd appreciate it because I'm not very technically competent. So that's what you want to talk about. Okay.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this.
All right. If I knew for certain that was what you want to do, we're going to do, that I've got 3 links at the bottom that would have been great to play, but maybe you can add them in
Play
afterwards.
them now, or do you want me to play them at the end? You tell me when. And
Don't you need time to prep for them?
No, I'll just click them. They'll come up.
Oh, all right. Well, they go to the very last slide, and it's 3 links, and it'll show you the time that we want to play them. So if you can play them, most people need time to queue them up. So you see the times there in red.
Yep, Ring of Fire. We'll play for 28 seconds. All right.
Okay.
A magnitude 8.8 earthquake has triggered evacuations and tsunami warnings in both Russia and Japan.
An 8.8 magnitude earthquake, one of the strongest ever recorded, struck Russia's Far East early Wednesday.
The tremor struck Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula, which is 250 kilometers away from Japan's Pacific coast.
And right on the cusp of colliding tectonic plates along the Pacific's notorious seismic ring of fire.
Triggering tsunami.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. All the information that's
There's 2 more. What it's about is that God's in charge. Everything that can shake will be shaken. That's everything that's geopolitical and everything that is geological. So if you can click those other 2, we'll show other parts of the world.
The unthinkable is happening off California. New land is rising overnight from the ocean floor, while entire neighborhoods are collapsing into the sea. And the seafloor is rising off California, and scientists are baffled. Over 130 homes have already been lost. And what's truly alarming is nobody expected a simple 1956 road project to unleash this geological chain reaction. Could it get even worse?
That's all we need.
To understand how human ambition.
okay. Very good. And the third one. That's 2 minutes and 34 seconds. All right.
From the beginning.
By the end of 2025, strange events erupted across China, signaling that 2026 will be an even more unsettling year. Recently, a netizen captured an eerie scene while building a fish pond. In the footage, an excavator dug into an underground cavern. Suddenly, a massive surge of water shot out of the hole, as if some raging creature was generating this. The excavator operator was so frightened, he had no idea what he had uncovered. Recently in Henan, Hebei, Shandong, and Shanxi, strange occurrences have emerged simultaneously. Underground water gushing, black mud churning, and bubbles rising to the surface. In Shanxi, the famous Nanlao Spring in Jinsi, which had been dry for over 20 years, suddenly began flowing again. In Shandong, an eerie phenomenon occurred in a wheat field. The ground bubbled up with black mud, and the air was filled with rising bubbles. Local villagers said there was several spots like this, resembling the ominous signs before a volcanic eruption. The sight was unsettling. In Shanxi base of Shan village in Qin County, large amounts of gas have been rising from the ground. In Jinan, Shandong, and the Longchuan Temple, an ancient spring is erupting. The recently revived Meihua Spring is also spouting, with water swirling like 5 streams, resembling a blooming plum blossom. The name Meihua Spring comes from this very site. The spring that had been dry for over 30 years at the source of the Jialu River in Zhengzhou had suddenly revived. On December 4th, 2025, the long, dry spring began to flow again. Initially, the flow was small, but after a few days, it grew larger and started gushing. The water column was as wide as a bucket, with streaming water rushing out and flowing along the ancient riverbed towards the Jialu River. On December 22nd, the pump house covering the spring was dismantled, and the surrounding area was paved with cobblestone. The water was crystal clear, attracting countless people who gathered to witness the spectacle. What was once a desolate area along the upper Jialu River quickly turned into a bustling marketplace. A netizen recently captured an odd phenomenon on the Yangtze River, where the water suddenly appeared to be boiling. The netizen expressed confusion, asking what this strange occurrence was and what was happening beneath the surface. A farmer mentioned that the water in their village was bubbling up from underground, likely due to a spring. The water has now spread across the area, flooding the entire village's farmland. Another netizen filmed a strange occurrence in a fish pond, saying,
Is that about it?
That's good. That's good. So,
Okay.
Michael, why did I want to show those? Because you and I have something that we share in common, and that is that we believe nothing's by accident. We believe God is in control of everything. And so I want to share with you what's going on. So God's had me study everything you can imagine, including geology. And so here's and astrology and archaeology and on and on and on. So there's three things happening. What God wants us to know is when you get an earthquake or a volcano or a snowstorm or a flood, no big deal. But if you go to the book of Revelation and you get it all in one time, now God is saying, look at me, pay attention. I'm the one in control. So what God is doing here is making sure that I don't care what Donald Trump does. I don't care what any of the governments of the world done. God wants us to look at him and know that he's in control. He's doing this to wake us up so that we will pay attention and bend a knee to him. So everything that can shake will shake. Now, let me tell you what's happening that's causing these things. There's three specific events. The first is that this year, 2026, all the planets are lining up in direct line with the sun. What does that do? It means we should be on the lookout for massive solar flares. And I don't know that this would have to do with what they talk about the 3 days of darkness, but in the 18th century, the solar flares were so bad that the wires on the telephone poles caught on fire. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at, that basically that's going to create what? Additional gravitational pull on the planet, right? But here's where it gets exacerbated, it gets worse. What's happening up north? What are we talking about Greenland for? Because the Arctic is melting, right? Well, the Earth is on the 23.5 degrees pitch, and as trillions of ice melts, what does it do? It causes a cantilever effect on the plates and puts them under pressure. And so when you have that happen, here's what's happening around the world. We're getting swarms all over the world, all over the Ring of Fire. That's where that started. And we're getting earthquake swarms. And they're so small, you don't even notice them. It might be one or two on the Richter scale. But they do damage. They do microfracture damage. And pretty soon, what we know from following this for decades is those are precursors to larger earthquakes. And what we also know is that the large earthquake is a precursor to volcanic eruptions. So right now, from 2025 till now, we have set a great big record. Yep. We have more volcanic eruptions happening than ever in history. 47 active volcanoes going on right now. Then there's one last thing, but I want to save that until we get to a specific slide. But I want to go back and I want to talk about, well, what was going on in China? Why did you show me that? There's something very interesting. The Chinese culture is very old, and a lot of what we look at today with our measurements, they look at through observation, right? So here's what the Chinese would say about what's happening over there. They say when water rises from where it wasn't before, like those springs that basically are now activated, the water coming up out of that fish pond, that's signaling pressure building up in the earth, and it's an omen that's negative. And when birds fly, the big birds fly all over the place, the animals migrate, they sense these earthquakes and these events coming before we do. So the overarching message here for us as Christians is we need to be the calm in the storm. We need to know that no matter what happens, that God has us protected, and we need to be the light in the darkness. So with that, I've got a couple of scriptures. I see you got this slide up. For we know that the whole of creation has been groaning together in the pain of what? Childbirth. That's what God wants us to know. He's birthing a new era for mankind. We're going to move into a higher spiritual realm, and basically God is telling us that brings birth pangs, and that's all this geological stuff that's happening. And then I just want to give people that sense of calmness. So this next one is, I give you authority over the power of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall harm you. So that's where we're at. We need to understand this is going to get scary. People are going to be fearful, but we need to understand God's got control. This one real quick is just a reminder. When we start to talk about geopolitical events in this day and age, we need to understand we're not talking about China, or Russia, or India, or America, or Venezuela. We're talking about the one world government. And this is the shift. This is what we're doing. This is the reset that I believe started at Christmas, where basically all the kingdoms of man have to fall. So when we talk about governments right now, we need to understand there's not a sovereign government in the world, but they're all going to fall. And as they fall, God's kingdom will be birthed, and we'll have sovereignty. We'll have our own sovereign currencies. We'll have basically control of our borders, etc. So I can talk forever, Michael. So would you chime in and see what you might want to add to this conversation?
No, I think that's great. I feel I've been telling my audience that we're going into even more global events, earthquakes and volcanoes and tsunamis and so forth. I predicted they would come last year on a great level, and they did. And I think this year is going to be an even greater level. And I believe also, like you do, this is God showing us that He is in control, and we need to listen to God and make sure we're not in the way of some of this. That's very easy to not be in the way if you're part of the kingdom of God and you're listening. You will be directed where to go and where to be at the perfect time.
Yep. And what I always try to say to my audience, these are crazy times. This is the time when anything that can shake will be shaken, but we need to trust in the Lord. So let's go to this next slide. And what we're at, and I'm sure you'll agree, we're at the point where if you look at all the geopolitical stuff now, kingdoms of man are falling. There's not a single major economy in the world that's not bankrupt or literally bankrupt. You've got, we're on the one with the monopoly guy.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what's happening is the kingdoms of man are falling. So Russia's in trouble. Iran's in trouble. China's in trouble. We're in trouble. We've never had a situation where there was an economic collapse coming that was of the magnitude that what's coming. So you have, let's go back, 29, that was about the stock market, right? That's one lung of our economy. And then what was 08? That was about real estate, right? Well, now we're going to bring the bonds in. It's going to be every engine of the economy for every nation in the world. But here's what's different. It's going to be catastrophic. It's going to be quick, but it's going to come right back, because in the past, we never took the money away from the global financial elite. Therefore, they just put their financial system, their debt trap, back in place, and they just started all over again until we got to the point that once again, we couldn't afford to buy anything and the system collapses. Well, what Donald Trump is doing is something that's never been done before. He's trying to orchestrate not a bankruptcy of the United States, but a soft collapse. That's why he's reducing, that's why he wants to lower the interest rates so we can refinance the debt if we have to at a lower rate. That's why he's then putting something into place that after we've had this collapse, the people are going to get confidence in the dollar again. That's why we have the strategic reserves. We have gold. We have it being raised. It was on the books at $42. He said he's going to raise it to 20,000. Then we see what's happening with silver. It's going through the roof. And then he's got Bitcoin. And all the Bitcoin he has, I'm sure you know about this, we didn't purchase a penny. It was all confiscated from the people who are overlords, right? He's got a goal set to get 1 million Bitcoin and then designate Bitcoin, it's part of the reserve, at $1 million. And then XRP, he's already said, is going to be the rails. We're going to get rid of SWIFT. It's going to be the system that allows us to transfer money quickly and efficiently, to break it down into the smallest denominator possible, transfer millions, billions for a fraction of a penny, and break down anything. So basically, as he goes through this, there's another little piece to how he's going to try to bring us a soft collapse. He's going to issue a stable coin, and that stable coin he's going to announce is backed by gold. And when you buy the stable coin, what he's going to do to take pressure off the dollar is he's going to use that to buy treasuries. So that's one half of Trump's plan. The next piece nobody's ever done. And that's basically everything that he's doing economically. He's going to grow America straight out of this. And there's a foreshadow for it. This is what America did. Okay, you can go up, but I'll just keep talking. So this is what America did back following the Civil War. We always have a foreshadow from God. We went bankrupt, totally bankrupt. And then we developed what? The Transcontinental Railroad. and then the assembly line, and then the automobile, and then the light bulb. And what do? We grew out of that collapse, and we became, within 34 years of that date, the wealthiest nation in the world. On our centennial anniversary, we declared America the wealthiest nation in the world, was the youngest nation in the world. So what Trump is going to do, he touted about it on Davos today. $18 trillion committed to build factories. We're going to have new energy, right? Because what did he say? Those factories are going to have their own electrical sources because our grid is ancient, right? So he's preparing for everything that has to be done to immediately collapse this economy, to take away the money from the global financial elite. Who controls money controls the world. Then we get control of all the spheres of influence. The banks fail. Now all the big banks, they're getting squeezed by the silver squeeze. It's going to lead to multiple bank failures. We're getting Venezuela to show us the election fraud, and then that's going to lead to massive evacuation of positions in the political arena at all levels. And so basically he's laying it all out, and it's all ordained and all coordinated by God, period. So I'm going to get off of that, and this is where I want to go back to the climate. See that picture there? It looks like piers. That's the Mississippi River. This is the third part of what's happening geologically. We always want to step in and we want to control things. Well, here's what happens. That Mississippi River is in peril right now. Basically, they're having to lower the cargo volumes because the river is shifting. It's narrowing. It's not as full as it was. Here's why. So we need to learn that God intends us to be stewards. So in the coming weeks and months, I'm going to do multiple shows on what stewardship means. But right now, we're going to talk about what we've done to the Mississippi River, and we've done it to every major river in the world. So what we do is we put levees and dams on them, and we confine them. Well, here's the way God had it worked out. They flood every spring, and for miles on both sides, there's water, and it sits there. And then when the spring falls in, what happens? The water level lowers, and then all that water, that spongy soil, it looks like a sponge. It seeps back into the river. And what we're looking at when we look at a river is half the water is above, half the water is below. We're changing the natural ebb and tide of the water system. And so we have voids because not only are we doing that, but we're pumping water from the aquifers. That is what's messing up the rivers of the world. And then that leads in some instances to earthquakes as well. So let's go down. And now let's stop and let you comment. And then we're going to go real quickly through all of the changes that are happening in the governments of the world. Do you want to comment before we go on?
Yeah, there's no way these governments go forward like you're talking about. They're evil. They're the B system, as you call it. I agree with that. And the earth and these systems are in tandem. Some of these evil systems have built, like you're talking about, all these dams and control systems and so forth, and they go hand in hand, and I think they will be destroyed hand in hand.
You know what one of the biggest Achilles heels is for China? The Three Gorges Dam. But anyway, let's go over to what's really the biggest story in the news right now, and that's what's happening in Iran. And I would just want to say there are people who have been criticizing, well, Trump hadn't acted fast enough and so forth. It's always more complicated than you think, folks. So the people of Iran have risen, and I have to say this. They've risen before, but never to this magnitude. If America doesn't step in, if Israel doesn't step in, if this isn't brought to conclusion and Iran falls, they'll come back with an iron fist, the likes of which you can't believe. But it's complicated. It's not that Trump is failing to cross any red line. The world is changing from a world that's controlled by essentially one nation, the United States of America, a unipolar world to a multipolar world. And so now when we go and do these, we have to look at what's happening around the world. So they've got a lot of munitions, a lot of missiles in Iran. And what are they doing? They're threatening to basically send missile bombardments on Israel. So we had to give Israel time to get ready so they had enough missiles to protect themselves. And then the Saudis, they're sitting on all the oil all over the place, and we have to be very sensitive as a globe about shortages of water. So he's had to work with them. And I think that basically he's got no choice as to come in. But in my opinion, this is going to get very sensitive. The prophets have been talking for a long time about it looking worse before it gets better, about it looking like we're going to go into World War III. And with the position of 20,000 troops, Iran could look that serious. But I trust God that the regime is going to fall. And basically, it's not going to be World War III. So comments from you, Jacob, before we go on.
Yeah, I haven't seen World War III either, and I don't see a civil war here in the United States. So I've been saying that for a long time. So it does get handled. It is a delicate, path that Trump is on. I see that. Yeah, I would attack now, but I've been in these situations, as a warrior, for 35 years, and I would see, why aren't we, hitting these guys right now? And then they pull us back, and we'd wait, and then we go in, and we find out that if we'd gone in when we all thought that we should and wanted to, we would have been annihilated. Because we waited, and it put them off guard, and we went in and we took them by surprise, and we basically won the day very easily. And so I think that's one of the things we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. I would put it this way. Listen to the Lord. It's always God's perfect timing. And that's what we're going to orchestrate. When we go in, it'll be exactly the perfect timing. Maybe, here's what I'm praying for. I'm praying for the fact that when it comes time, he gives them an ultimatum, and they've been so disrupted that the forces that are going to be launched against us just say, we're not going to die for the regime. And maybe this thing doesn't get as nasty as we think it is. Shall we go to China real quick?
Yeah.
I've got an insight into China, done a lot of stuff on China. And it's very simple what's going on in China. China massacred over 10,000 students in Tiananmen Square. And that became a pivotal moment in their future history because the people were ready to revolt. And what happened is the CCP stepped in and said, look, folks, if you'll agree to live under communism, we'll agree to give you full employment and raise you from the abject poverty you're in to a middle-class status. And that was a social contract that they made. And we can see it playing out. Every time their economy started to slow down, they built another ghost city. Every time it slowed down, they built another mega project, the Three Gorges Dams, the bullet trains, et cetera, keep the people happy, keep them working. Well, now we're in a situation where God is orchestrating complete global deglobalization and de-dollarization because he wants to usher in his kingdom. And it's a kingdom in which no one nation or group of nations is allowed to control the world. Everybody has economic parity, and we have to end all the wars. And that's what Trump is doing. So what's happening in China? I could go on for an hour about the failing real estate market, about the water crisis that they have, about them losing their manufacturing. But what it really comes down to is the people are also revolting in China because they've lost their future. When the real estate market collapsed, that's where their savings was. So they've lost their life savings. When the manufacturers leave, they lost their jobs. That picture you see down below with the fire, that's them burning factories because they haven't been paid for months. Then the youth was told, go get a college education and you'll have a good life. Well, they became something called the ant people, where they got their college education. They're working 16 hours a day, living in a tiny little efficiency apartment with a roommate. That's their life. And then it gets worse. As unemployment gets worse and worse and worse because of all the things that are happening internally, we get a group of people called the lay down people. They're saying it's so bad, it's 50% unemployment probably for the youth, though they don't tell us the numbers, that we're not even going to participate. So China is having the same kind of problem that Iran is having. Massive social upheaval, massive. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing people standing up and saying, communism doesn't work. So God said the kingdoms of man must fall. Communism is going to fall because it's tyrannical. Capitalism has to fall for a different reason, because we have the ability to make products that could last forever, but instead we have an economy based on planned obsolescence, which causes us to take those same resources and over and over and over again, rebuild. And so the global financial elite want to keep their current system. So what they want to do is basically kill us because they believe we're consuming too many of their natural resources. Well, I got some information for you. Basically, we can build products, we can use magnets to run cars and those magnets will last 300 years and they're not connected to the grid. And then when at Davos, what happened? They kind of started to out the Green Deal is not working. So let's look at the silver squeeze that's putting pressure on the economy and looking like it's going to collapse banks. Well, here's something I bet your audience didn't know. Basically, China is the #1 manufacturer of facial recognition, of EVs, and along with the batteries that go with them, and on wind and on solar. And they're all grossly inefficient. That's why they're saying we're going to have individual power plants for these factories that we're going to build here in this country. And finally, the Europeans are admitting the Green Deal doesn't work. So Trump is going to out the Green Deal. I'm going to out the Green Deal. I've got lots and lots of detailed information on it. But guess what? They say by 2030, we might have a deficiency of silver by as much as 60%. Well, 50% of the silver that we use in manufacturing today, which is, by the way, what's driving up the price of silver, guess what? It's involved in those 4 grossly inefficient technologies that are still tied to the grid. The problem isn't carbon, it's water. That's the problem that the world faces, is a shortage of clean water. So if all of a sudden everybody in the world woke up and realized that the Green New Deal was a Green New scam, and we started cutting back on that, you know what would happen? As soon as we killed it, basically there'd be 50% more silver to use for manufacturing for things that we really needed, like manufacturing for our military, manufacturing for the technological revolution that's going to grow America out of the crisis that we're in. So this is an artificially created collapse situation. And then guess what? You know the nation in the world that is the #1 manufacturer of all 4 of those technologies? China. So if we expose that and China's in the weakened position they're in, I think that's the last nail in the coffin. China collapses. So comments before we go on to the next country?
Yeah, I think that China was funded by Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. A lot of people think they're separate, but they're part of the City of London as well, as far as their economic control and manipulation and so forth. They're not independent. So we're overall, when we take down the City of London and the European Union, so forth, all these dominoes are going to start to collapse. China being one of them.
Absolutely, every nation in the world, every major nation, is on the brink of economic collapse, and God is going to bring them all down because he's going to take the money system down, and that's what's going to give us back the kingdom of God that he wants. So let's move on to Russia, and we'll see what's happening over there. So silver is squeezing the economy, right? Well, so is oil. And so what's Trump doing in Venezuela? He's the 2 most important things in my mind. There's 3. One is the drug trafficking, but that's not the most important. The really important one is finding out the truth about the theft of elections, but also getting oil for the foreseeable future until we can get those new technologies out that Trump is going to make available to us because of the Chevron deal that he got that takes 5,915 suppressed patent technologies and going to release them. Oil is a squeeze. So what's he doing? He's put the embargo on Venezuela, and that meant that oil wasn't going to China. And they have only, if they were at maximum storage capacity, they only have a 90-day storage capacity, and they import 70% of the oil. So oil is being used to squeeze these various economies. And then in Russia, where do they get the oil? They get it from Siberia, 3,000 miles away. And we had a situation with them back in '80 when Russia fell, that they got so bad in economic trouble that they had to shut down their wells. And when you do that, the vacuums broke. It takes years and billions to bring that oil back into production. Russia is probably going to be put in that kind of a squeeze because Trump has got in and he's basically negotiated with Europe not to buy their oil and with India not to buy their oil. And so if they don't have a marketplace, then they're in dire trouble with the winner. Basically, the aristocrats are coming They say we need to get out of this war. The people are now protesting. Hunger is happening. Water shortages are happening. They don't even have coal in some cities in Siberia. So people are freezing to death. So basically, Russia, the problem is if Trump can keep the Middle East from being bombed with what's happening in Iran, oil prices are going to go down. And Russia's oil, if it's anything above below $70, at $70 is their break-even point. And so basically, Trump is squeezing the Iranian and Ukrainian war, the Russian and Ukrainian war, with oil. And so, what's all this have to do with God? God wants to usher in His kingdom, and in His kingdoms we don't have war, and we have economic parity between every nation in the world. And so, we're going to look at currency revaluations as we go forward as well. But that's another story for another day. Let's go on down and we'll go to Venezuela. And they say a picture is 1,000 words.
I think there's the possibility that the U.S. and Russia, become friends or, allies.
We may already be. I think I know where you're going. You're going to the soccer ball, and then let's give some historical relevance to this. Basically, you talked about the Rothschilds, right? Well, basically, almost every major nation in the world is under the Rothschild banking system. From its inception, Russia has been against the Rothschild central banking system, and it was Stalin who said, if you inflict a nation with a central bank that's 90% of communizing it. So in the Civil War, Russia said to the British, if you go into that war on the side of the South, we'll come in on the side of the North. And way, way, way back in the 18th century, they tried to create what was the equivalent of the UN, and basically Russia, the Tsar of Russia, blocked it. So we've got a guy who has similar interest. Donald Trump is an anti-globalist. Putin is an anti-globalist. And then where are we in the Bible? I always look to the Bible. If you look at the Bible, you see that Europe is acting very much like China is acting. They're basically moving more and more and more towards totalitarian governments. Look at what they do with freedom of speech and put people in prison for saying things. So I go to the Bible immediately and I go over and I say, the combination beast. Well, that's what? Who's in that? England. And England is the mouthpiece for the combination beast. And Germany, that's the leopard. They're the manufacturing might for Europe. And Russia is the bear. And what does it say about the bear? It says it calls it the sleeping bear. So right now, what I think is going to happen, if I look at my Bible and do some analysis, the war is going to be stopped because God is going to usher in a period of peace and prosperity. He's going to create situations where we see that He orchestrated this and we bend a knee and turn to Him. And so Russia is the sleeping bear. Russia's going to go back to sleep, and they're not going to come back until we get fully into the book of Revelation and we see the hordes coming down from the north into Israel. And guess what? They say that Saudi Arabia's oil is drying up, and there's a prophecy that says that Israel is going to make a major oil find, and they're a nation that has no water naturally, but yet they have regreened their deserts. They've sold technology to the world. And so when we get into that book of Revelation, they have plenty of water. They're exporting their technology, drip irrigation technology, desalination technology, etc. So why would they come against Israel? Because they don't have water and because they don't have oil. And Israel is going to be sitting on plenty of both. So I just keep looking to the Bible and I say it's playing out today. It played out yesterday and it'll play out tomorrow. Back to you, Michael, before we go on.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I think, because of the Orthodox Christianity, they're very strong Christians in Russia, have good values, good morals. And I think that Trump is squeezing them to, get on the right side of this. And I think that's going to happen.
I agree completely. The next one we can go over pretty quick. A picture's 1,000 words. That's Venezuela, and that flag in the front is the United States of America flag. These people have been liberated. That's what it comes down to. And what we get that's out of it that I think is the most important thing that benefits them and us and 71 other nations in the world, we get the proof that our elections have been stolen. The way I do history, we haven't had an honest election since McKinley. When what happened is McKinley was going against William Jennings Bryan, and Bryan was against the monopolies, and McKinley, he wanted big business. And so basically the three wealthiest men in the nation, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and Rockefeller got together and said, oh my God, if we don't get McKinley elected, our dynasties are going to fall. I don't think he was complicit, but they took all their power, all their money, and they got him elected. And then they had an aha moment. My books are about tipping points. And that was a tipping point that said, oh my goodness, if we can buy a president, we can buy a congressman or a senator or a governor, we can buy anybody we want in any level in the government. We can buy banks, we can buy corporations. And then Lincoln said way back, he said, I fear for our great nation because I see the formation of corporations that will merge with banks, and one day they will take their money and influence politicians, and the people will lose their freedom. That's where we're at. That's where Venezuela's at. That's where the world's at. And God is going to bring down all those systems, and he's going to usher in a new economic system that's not based on fiat currency, that's based on, he says, all the gold is his, all the silver is his, the cattle on 1,000 hills are his. So it's a system that's based not on lack, but based on plenty. And it's based on all of the natural resources of the world, all the minerals of the world. And now we have a technology. In 68, God showed me this very event's unfolding. But he said, it can't happen until we get a technology that allows us to fractionalize the commodities of the earth so that they're usable to be spent to make economic transactions. That's where we're at. So basically, the people of Venezuela are going to get their freedom. Comments before we go on, Michael?
No, I totally agree. And, Venezuela is, we're going to be getting Canada, not Canada, but Canada, Alberta is basically breaking free, but Mexico, the cartels in Mexico, we're going to be striking them pretty soon. And we've already seen Claudia Sheinbaum is like, she's going in hysterical mode because they control. But I think she's going to be given the option, just like we gave the option to Maduro. We'll let her go away in some place where she's safe and she'll live out the rest of her life. If she resists, then, she probably won't get the same deal that Maduro did. She'll probably get something worse.
Well, actually, what you've taken us to is to the biggest strategy in the whole world, at least as far as the United States is. There's a geopolitical shift of power occurring from the west to the east. 80% of the world's population is in the east, but yet we have the largest consumer market. Why? Because we're diversified and we have a strong middle class. But as manufacturing is leaving China and going to Vietnam and going to South Korea and going to Thailand and so forth, they're going to have a larger and larger middle class. They're going to get more to market. So Trump's got to play his tariff card right now because soon it's not going to be there. We're not going to be the sole world's reserve currency. When we come out of this financial collapse, he has a plan using all the things that I said before with the strategic assets, but he's got another component to it. And that is that he is going to make us the crypto capital of the world. Well, let me explain what the significance of that is. China at one point mined more Bitcoin than anybody, but they've kicked it out because it was decentralized. They wanted a centralized system. So I'll come back to that in a later slide and tell you why that's so important and why everybody in the world needs to understand that. But he's going to make us a crypto capital world. This is Trump. Well, why is it important? Because when we go to a system that's run by the rails with XRP, basically the third world nations, the nations in, let's say, Africa, the whole continent of Africa, China, which has now slipped into poverty, portions of India, they're all, by and large, unbanked. So if we now have tied our currency to stable coins backed by gold, and if we are the crypto capital of the world, we're not only the safest solution in the world, we're not only the fairest economy in the world, but now we're the most convenient currency to use because they can use our system and be unbanked. And so he's got the perfect strategy to see to it America will not come out as the sole reserve currency, but I believe will still come out as the primary reserve currency in a political world that's changed from a a uniglobe to a multiverse. There'll be probably 4 or 5 different currencies that are going to be used. All these great nations, they're not going to go away. You know what's going to happen? We're going to go back in history. History always repeats. We're going to go back to the kingdoms that existed before, to basically the regional powers that existed in the world. And China's not going to go away. China's just going to become a very, very big and very strong regional power. It's not ever going to threaten to be the world's reserve currency. I mean, the world's leader. And we'll get to that in a later slide. So let's go to Canada. And Carney, I think he probably got a surprise recently. He reached out and went over to China, spent 3 days over there, came back and said, hey, I did a deal with China. And he was stupid enough to say this. Remember back when in 89, the wall fell. Who orchestrated? A Polish Pope from Poland who was a communist, Gorbachev, and Bush Sr. And 20 days after the fall, they met not in a government building, but in a church. And they announced what? The birth of the new world order. What did Carney do? If you watch the footage, he said that he was proud to be joining forces with China in the new world order. That sends chills against my spine, and probably Canada's. So what's happening? He comes back, and Alberta has done a deal where they went behind his back and did a pipeline. And that gave encouragement to the other 5 resource provinces in Canada. And now they're all looking to pass petitions to basically be able to vote as to whether or not they want to leave Canada. And so they don't want to be under communism. So when we get to the right slide, I'll tell you the message that I have for the Canadians. But first, let's stop and see what you might want to add to that. And then we'll go down through the whole rest of the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah, so China, as you were saying, is a beast system. They're all over the United States. Now, when we did the strike in Venezuela to get Maduro, there's rumors that it was held up for 4 days. And during those 4 days, that was when the Chinese, some Chinese ministers went to Venezuela. They met hours before the strike where we went in. Mm-hmm. And it was close to, I guess they were staying at a hotel that was close to the palace when we went in and got them. So it was basically a big signal for China, and I think that's one of the things that Trump wanted to do.
Well, Trump wants China out of our hemisphere as well as Russia. So let's go on down to the next slide. I'm not sure what the next one is. All right, here we are. So if you live in Canada and you're thinking about maybe you might want to be part of the United States, I'm going to tell you why you want to be. So go on up a little bit, scroll up so we can get that slide. Here's my message to people all over the world, literally, to the people in the EU who are looking to embrace China. Because what are they doing? They're saying, well, the cheese moved. We took advantage of America for decades, and now they're coming back and they're saying, you've got to protect yourself militarily, and you've got to pay your fair share on trade, and you've got to pay your fair portion on medical. So basically, they're having a hissy fit, just like a kid, right? And so they're saying, oh, well, we can leverage America by cozying up to China. I got to warn you something, folks. Look at this. So why they got out from under mining Bitcoin is they wanted a central bank digital currency. Look at the picture down below. That's facial recognition. Every place you go, millions and millions and millions of 5G cameras tracking you. You go on the internet, and the same thing is happening in Europe, and you're monitored, and you say the slightest thing wrong, and you're going to get fined or you're going to get put in prison. But in China, it gets worse. So now here's what happens. If you say anything against the CCP, this is absolutely the early introduction of the beast system. Now, it's not going to happen right now, but here's what in China today, if you get zinged on your credit score, you didn't go visit your grandmother and father often enough, you smoked too many cigarettes, you said something bad about the CCP, they come in and they lower your credit score. It's not like here where it's just, can you borrow money? It says anybody who associates with you, their credit score is lowered. Any employer who employs you, their credit score is lowered. Any landlord who rents to you, their credit score is lowered. And then it comes down to the full-blown beast system where all of a sudden you can't have a job, you can't have a house, you're out on the street, and that you can't buy and you can't sell, and you are absolutely just totally devastated because they inflicted the beast system. And now for those who don't even do anything wrong, and they pay you your paycheck, whatever you get. If you don't spend it within a certain amount of time, I think it's 30 days, they take the money because they don't want you having money. And then they can determine what you can buy and what you can't buy on an individual basis, on a national basis. This is the beast system talked about in the book of Revelations. And so I say to Canada and I say to Europe, if you think you can leverage America by wooing up to China, then you are walking straight in to absolute total slavery. You're walking into the beast system. America is the only nation in the world that you want to align yourself with. And before we finish this presentation, you'll understand why. Comments before we go on, Michael?
No, it's really, really good points. Thank you.
Well, let's go then and start talking about why America. We're done with all the scary stuff, Michael. It gets better from here on out. So here we go. So what's Trump doing? Trump's pretty genius. He's a 5G chess player. Plus, he's got a lot of brilliant people behind him. So we went to what? A decentralized system that can't be controlled. Well, let's break it down. So what's that run on? It runs with XRP. It means it's got an economic efficiency. You can transfer billions of dollars in a fraction of a second for a few pennies because all the middlemen are cut out. But what else does it do? It runs on blockchain. So now we're looking at, we haven't exactly had honest elections, right? Well, with a blockchain and a few little changes to the laws, all of a sudden we have transparency, and it's much more harder, if not impossible, to cheat on elections. And then we've got banks, lots of scandals coming out on the banks where they did money laundering and where they did trafficking, and they basically stole billions and trillions of dollars through the system. Well, once you've got blockchain, it's a whole lot more difficult to do that. So the system that Trump is setting up is going to give us an economic system where they can't. What is Doge all about? It's about waste and fraud, where all of that's going to, what do they say? Follow the money trail. This is going to expose it all. So what do we get out of this economic system that America is going to give to the world? Freedom and prosperity, and we get economic stability. And here's what we got. It's basically decentralized. It gives you privacy. It gives you transparency. It gives you the protection of blockchain technology. It prevents election tampering. It prevents money laundering. It transitions. Transactions are decentralized, fractionalized, and settled in a fraction of a second. And those billions and billions of dollars they kept in nostro accounts so that they can transfer money from one country to another are gone. So what we're moving into is the whole framework. I want to make sure people hear this economic message. They said since Ripple was founded 13 years ago, they've been against crypto, against Ripple, against everything. No, that was to keep the price down, folks. That was so that when they finally came in, the price would be low, people would not adopt it. And basically, there's only about 1% of the people in the world that own XRP. And so basically what is happening is we had that 5-year lawsuit. It's gone. We have the Bitcoin Act, which is on the book, in process. We got the Genius Act passed. We have the, I'm going to forget the name, the Clarity Act that's passed the House, that's going to go to the Senate and hopefully get passed. And we've got XRP as being part of the reserve system for the economy. So what's going to happen is, as soon as all of that is totally clarified, XRP is going to be part of that strategic reserve, and those things are going to be tier 1 assets. So it'll be XRP, it'll be Bitcoin, it'll be Dogecoin, so basically we'll have total clarity. And once that happens, those 17 ETFs, the largest one being BlackRock, comes in and sucks all of the XRP out of the marketplace. And all of a sudden, so anybody who doesn't have XRP, once this clarity reaches, there won't be any XRP to buy. It'll be in the hands of the people that are going to be running the financial system. But we will have become, in the collapse, XRP and the system Trump has set up will become the rails, and it will basically, in an economy that has collapsed, they always freeze the credit. It will become the liquidity to keep the markets running. So I need you to understand that Donald Trump has set up a way to transition from the financial collapse into a situation where we can keep the global logistics supply chain running. And anybody who's got XRP, God told me 4 years ago, ever since I had my near-death experience, he comes to me. I'm not a prophet, but he comes to me at key moments and tells me things. He told me 4 years ago, prepare, find out what crypto is. I didn't even know. He says, find out what XRP is. He came back and said, XRP is going to be the world's reserve currency. And there's never been a time in the history of man where individuals were allowed to buy what was going to be the world's reserve currency. So go do your homework, folks. I'm telling you, that's the system that is coming. And then if we go to Lincoln, here's what was going to come. And Trump has said every nation has to have what? Economic parity. That means that the dinar has to revalue, the dong has to revalue, eventually the bolivar has to revalue, eventually the zim has to revalue, but two of them are set. They're in economic stability right now. Iran is exporting oil, not as crude oil, but as refined oil. Vietnam is growing by leaps and bounds with all the manufacturing that's coming out of China. They're economically stable. All we're waiting for is the political stability to be achieved, and then bang, like that, those currencies are going to revalue. Go do your homework, folks. It might be some place that you might want to consider putting a couple of dollars into. I'm not a financial advisor, but there's a pattern that's unfolding. And so basically what Trump is talking about it, and what is let's go all the way back. It was Eisenhower. And Eisenhower said, is there any man, any woman, any child that doesn't understand that the principal cause of war is economic inequality between nations? Mm-hmm. So, Michael, I think this is up your alley. We get all the nations of the world where they've collapsed. We rebuild the economic system. We take it away from fiat currency. We put it on God's economic system. We make it so that it can be transferred easily when we have equity in the market, and the world has changed. And then, I'm not going to talk about it here. I have whole shows on it. Then what happens is Nassar can kick in and all the currencies can reset, because we have to have economic parity. We are the ones who bombed Vietnam. We're the ones who bombed Iraq. And guess what? Now, maybe, Michael, you might have seen something firsthand that I've only got third or fourth hand, but it's my understanding that when our troops were on the ground, we got a pretty substantial amount of dong and a whole lot of dinar. And other nations of the world knew that was going to be worth something eventually. And we have warehouses full. And I looked at what I never really watched the Apprentice, but I happened to watch 2 times. And on this one occasion, it was so funny. It was God ordained. He hands $1 trillion Zim bond to one of the people and says, now, this isn't worth much right now, but you keep this. One day, this is going to be worth a lot. So Zimbabwe has had an economic collapse, but they're one of the wealthiest nations in the world. So let me shut up and go back to you and see how you kind of want to, and then we've only got, I think, 2 slides left.
Okay. Yeah, the Iraqi dinar, I have a ton of it, and I believe it's going to really take off. And one of the things that's been keeping it, suppressed is Iran. So once Iran is basically, taken, their evil, rulers are taken down, which I think is very imminent, then we're going to probably see some of that start to take off. It won't be all the way to the top like it was for what was the country we went into, not Bahrain, but anyway, one of those Middle Eastern countries where we rescued them, and their currency just went through the roof, and it was down just like the Iraqi dinar, and it went 3-to-1 to the US dollar. So I think that's going to happen for many of those currencies we've been talking about. Now, are
you thinking of Kuwait? Is that what you're thinking of?
Kuwait, that's it. Yeah, the Kuwaiti dinar was basically was knocked down when Saddam Hussein's army came in, Iraqi army came in there, and once they were pushed out by us, the Kuwait wanted to give every soldier that fought a gold medal for fighting, solid gold, and Bush said, no, we're not going to do that. It was like, what? Evil systems, in America, even though we were doing some good things. Now, as far as like Trump today, he talked about crypto, Bitcoin. So when Trump says something, it's going to happen. It depends. It's now we're going to see it happen, but when do you think it's going to happen?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, as far as like the $1 million Bitcoin and who knows where XRP will go, but when do you think that happens? Do you think it happens after the collapse of the old system? I would say so, but what are your thoughts?
I don't like to give time frames. I'll be general. Okay. I think that if Trump gets his way, okay, his goal is to have the collapse occur and to have us back on stable ground by the 250th anniversary, which would be July the 4th. What do I think is going to happen? I think right now we're seeing the toppling of these governments, right? And the whole banking system comes down. And I think that's likely to happen in the first quarter of this year. I go back to Kim Clement, and Kim Clement talked about, and people thought he was wrong. They just didn't look at all the parameters. He said we'd have a chaotic summer. He said that we'd have falls and rises in the fall. Well, what's going to trigger those falls and rises? The understanding, first of all, collapse of governments economically, but also the understanding of the people in the world that they have governments that are illegal, that they have laws on the books that were passed in order to enslave them. So basically, we have laws that are passed in order to do what? To basically create a legal dictatorship. So as those things come down, we're going to see in the fall. I mean, we're going to see what right now we've moved into that period. It's already started. The governments are collapsing. Everything is shifting. We're going to get all of these politicians exposed and drain the swamp, not only in America but around the world. And I think that a lot of that, given the urgency of what's going on, I mean, the magnitude of the riots in Russia is now rioting, China's now rioting, Iran's not rioting, and now basically to Europeans again, as you woo to China. Let me just ask you to go out and do a little searching on the web. What you're going to find is that with regards to China, there's just not protest happening in China. There are protests happening in the Middle East and in Africa with some of the nations that were part of the Belt and Road Initiative, because they were absolutely driven into a debt trap. And now as they see China have trouble, they're raising their heads. So you don't want to be under any economic system that's controlled by China. So I don't know if that answers your question enough. I don't want to go out too far, but I think we'll see some major changes in the first quarter of this year. I think we'll see probably the collapse happen before the first quarter is over, and restoration begin to be pretty strongly indicated by the middle of the year. Now, what does that line up with what you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. Midterms now. 5 days ago, Trump said he was going to cancel the midterms, and sometimes he'll throw something out there to see how people are going to react to it. I think his person that does his talks in the White House, she came out and said, yeah, he was just joking. But if we see the Venezuelan information come through that a lot of these corrupt governors and senators and congressmen are there illegally, through fraud, we may see them get pulled. So we may see a very significant problem. And of course we have Wisconsin. I think we're going to duke it out with that. I think we're going to see them, start to shoot, and that's probably going to be insurrection act. So who knows? We may have many cities that are, have military members that are having to go into them. The military's already been warned, so get ready to go into some of these cities, as some of us been hearing. So it's
and Trump made provision for all of that already. So basically, Comipasatana, I probably pronounced it wrong. It was basically put in when he declared we're under a national emergency, closed the border. He's put 2,000 troops per every state around so that he can put these fires out. And we're not going to, just like you said, we're not going to go to civil war. We're going to have insurrection in several cities, the sanctuary cities, and we may have to go to limited martial law, but we're not going to have a full-blown civil war in this country. At least that's my opinion.
I agree completely. I've been saying that for years, and I think we're getting it down to the point where, some of these radicals are going to get pushed in some of these big cities, unfortunately, and that's going to be their end there. So it'll be it's a very interesting time, and I hope that for July 4th we're celebrating. It's all taken care of, but it might take a little bit, but we're still going to celebrate regardless.
Yep.
And
I don't have a crystal ball. I just don't. But I know what Kim Clement said, and he said we'd be happy by Christmas. So how do I interpret that? A lot of people say no, it didn't happen. Well, here's what I say. I say the wealth transfer actually began on Christmas. Why? Because that's when the silver squeeze happened. And people who had silver that bought it at 12, at 18, at 20, at 25, all of a sudden they're looking at 100 plus, and it's going to keep going until we reach the threshold where the manufacturers can't afford to pay the price anymore. It's either that or go out of business. So basically what happened is that was the beginning of the wealth transfer, because now those people that had that silver are finding that it's worth double, triple, quadruple what it was. And now we're positioned as Iran falls, and as you said, the foot is taken off the neck of Iraq, then we can start to have the currencies reset. And then we have the collapse, and then Trump brings $18 trillion to restore our economy. So I think the very inception, the very beginning of the wealth transfer happened at Christmas, when Kim Clement said you'll be happy at Christmas time. So that's my opinion. Well, let's go on, go to the next slide. And I just want to close on, I'm proud to be an American. Here we are. Requirements for peace and prosperity. America brings this to the world. Sovereign currency, sovereign borders, honest elections, resource independence, manufacturing prowess, remove regulatory obstructions. That's so we can build those factories. Energy independence, equitable trade agreements, global financial parity, our First and Second Amendment rights, and shared values and goals so that we don't have that civil war. And then I want to go to one last slide, other than to make an announcement about something I'll be doing. This is, again, where I say to all the leaders in the world, you pay attention, you look at this slide, you take a screenshot. This is important. You do not want to live under a communist nation. You do not want to live under China. You do not want to live under a beast system. America, once we get out from under the global financial elite, once what Trump is saying, we're going to go from centralized to decentralized banking system, right? Once we get out of that, once we get out of under the control of the Rothschilds, then the true heart of America will come out, and we are a nation who is going to follow God, and we're going to create projects all over the world to help humanity. So here's what you get if you follow the United States of America: a free society that you can trust, not a beast system, diverse and abundant natural resources. So they talk about Greenland and how we need Greenland to get those resources. We don't need those resources. What we need is ownership of Greenland so that we militarily control our interest, and the interest of Greenland, and the interest of Canada, and the interest of all of the Western Hemisphere. We never really got into that, so maybe I'll go back. So just like you said, Mexico is going to topple. What we have to do is we have to help every nation from Mexico to Latin America to South America get out from under the cartels, get sovereign governments, get in a situation where they have sovereign currency, and where we can help them develop their infrastructure and help them become nations that have good standards of living, and then they become basically totally tied to the United States sphere of influence, which we need to do to counteract the shift of power from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere. So back to this. So basically, you want to be under the sphere of influence of America because it's a free society, diverse, abundant natural resources. So what I was saying there is it's not rare earth. Rare earth is not rare. It's we gave that to China because we didn't want to process it because it's dirty. So we really have one reason for going to China that's essential: national security. Let's go on down. Leadership in manufacturing and trade. America innovated the Industrial Revolution, the .com, the computer, and we're still ahead in AI. America is going to take those 5,915 patents, and it's going to free them, and we're going to have not the inefficient green technology, but we're going to have truly cost-effective, very, very cheap technology that basically does not pollute at all, and that's going to change the entire world. I've got whole presentations just around that one bullet point. And then demographics as it relates to GDP. Why is Japan in such trouble? By the way, that's another trigger that's going to contribute to the financial collapse that's coming. We don't have time to get into that, but basically they're going to fall. Japan's in a crisis, and they're going to be forced to sell off a lot of U.S. treasuries, which is maybe what God wants, to bring all the system down. But basically, they have the oldest population in the world now. Who's got the distinction right now? I think it's China. We still have a relatively young population, which means we don't have that huge burden from the elderly that they had. We're getting old, but we're good. And then the last thing is we have the quintessential military of the world. So if you come to America, you get national security, you get all of the benefits that you get as an American. You get freedom, prosperity, a nation you can trust. And the Europeans are whining, not because we're treating them unfairly, because we're saying it's America first now. You've taken advantage of us for too many years. We're going to be there for you. Unless you do something crazy, we'll keep NATO, we'll help you, but we come first. And here's why. America, in its weakened condition right now, can't help anybody. But the America that Donald Trump envisions, that he has laid the foundation for, is America that is financially solvent, that is technologically leader of the world, that can then step in and share that technology with the rest of the world and pull the whole world out of this chaotic malaise that we're in, and basically bring peace and prosperity to the entire world. Michael, before we go on, comments from you, and then I just got one more quick slide.
No, it's definitely going to be a better world going forward. And, like you're saying, the American economy has to be fixed before we can move forward and help the rest of the world, obviously. But we're setting the stage for that. And I think that, moving forward, it's going to be all these, incredible technologies that have been suppressed for a long time, free energy and all these different things are going to come out, levitating vehicles, all kind of crazy stuff. These are just the things we know about, but I've heard that, the things that we think are fantastical are just peanuts compared to what is really coming. So that's pretty impressive, and we have it.
Well, you probably have inside information. I don't, but I've heard some pretty fantastical things. I can tell you that. So you just mentioned on something I wasn't going to mention, but let me mention it. Then this is an announcement I have to make. So let's look at the financial future for Americans a year from now. So if we move from Federal Reserve, from basically paying up to 35% taxes that go over to the aristocracy in Europe, and you're out from under that because we've gone to an external system, right? External revenue service. So that's maybe as much as 35% more in your pocket. Now, if we've gotten out from under property taxes, because originally we didn't have property taxes, maybe that's another $10,000 or $12,000 in your pocket. And then now if we go to free energy, let me explain something to you. That's gigantic, because everything that you will ever buy, have bought ever, will buy, the principal cost, sometimes as much as 60 to 70% of the cost of everything you've ever bought or ever will, is the energy it takes to mine it, to process it, to manufacture it, to ship it around the world. And once we get relatively free energy, the cost of everything you will buy goes down. And then once we transfer over to a technology that's not based on planned obsolescence, but based upon longevity. Maybe you get a 3D printed house that lasts for 150 years. Maybe you get an icebox that lasts for 50 years. Maybe you get a house that's made of carbon fiber that lasts for 300 years. So all of a sudden, you're not buying things over and over and over again. And the things you do buy are a fraction of the cost of what they were. And when we go on, I'm going to do a show on real estate coming up. I had 12 years in real estate. I was a broker, even had my own small brokerage firm at one point until 2008 came along. I'm going to talk about the real estate market and what's going to happen there that's going to put more money in your pocket and give the millennials and the Generation Z's an actual opportunity to buy a home. So with that, I just want to make an announcement. My first book has been out for a year and a half or so, Limited Crusade, Restoring the Fight to Save the Free World. But this book that you see here, I'm going to release it for pre-sale on Valentine's Day, for general sale on March probably the 6th. And it's the follow-up book. So basically, what do? They're companions. They tell you the foundation of America. For example, we were based on a simple sales tax. What made America great, how we lost it, how we get it back. And then the second book was written 3 years ago. God always has me do things in advance. Then I pulled it out when he told me it was ready to be released and rewrote it. So basically, it's now up to the very last second of everything that's going on. And what is it? How we restore our economy and how we keep it. And so that book will be coming out, and I hope you'll check it out. And we'll be doing a whole bunch of 1 minute pieces on all over the place, telling people about it. So now I just want to tell you, I'm available to be seen at my website. You see it right there, LarryBallard.com. And I have my own show. It's relatively new, but it's growing by leaps and bounds. And it's Liberty Crusade Official on YouTube and on Rumble.
Wow.
And this guy, you want to check him out constantly, perpetually. I've got to know him a little bit. And here's what I would say. I was expecting a totally different person than the person I met. I expected this warrior that was gruff and rough and tough. I gotta tell you, this man's that, but he's got a heart of gold, and he is on a mission to help mankind. And so this is a man you want to check out on a regular basis, because he's not in this to make gobs and gobs of money. He's in it because he's on a spiritual journey.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that.
Welcome.
And also LarryBallard.com.
LarryBallard.com is my website, and
Okay.
my show is Liberty Crusade Official.
Very good. Very good. All right. Wow. Another unbelievable presentation. So thanks so much, Larry, for coming in and sharing your incredible information. And that was a great slide presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I see you're going to have a somewhat cloudy but beautiful evening. Look at that. You got such a beautiful setting there. I tell you, wow.
Yeah, it's God's gift. It's beautiful.